The moment blood hit the cabin floor, I remembered my father's last words. Con oi. When they try to erase you, make sure the whole world sees it happen. He didn't tell me it would cost a fractured rib and 3.1 million witnesses. Seattle's rain hammered the floor-to-ceiling windows of my Laurelhurst home at 4:37 a.m. I stood in the walk-in closet staring at two versions of myself hanging side by side. On the left, Tom Ford charcoal suit, Hermes tie, Berluti Oxfords, the uniform of a CEO. On the right, Loro Piana cashmere hoodie in navy blue, $1,100 that looked like 30, paired with Brunello Cucinelli joggers in heather gray that could pass for Target clearance rack. New Balance 990 V6 sneakers, white with navy trim, 3 years old and perfectly broken in. My father's voice echoed in the empty closet, not a memory. A recording I'd saved on my phone, recorded 11 months ago when the lung cancer had stolen most of his breath, but none of his conviction. Dominic, listen to me. You're about to inherit an empire I built with my hands. $50 billion in assets, 47 years of sweat. But the day you forget where you came from is the day you become what I fought against. I'd been 23 when Solomon Kellen started Apex Airways in a rented hangar at Boeing Field. He was a black mechanic who'd been passed over for promotion 17 times at Pan Am because, as one supervisor put it, customers don't trust colored boys to fix their planes. So he fixed them anyway, after hours under the table until he'd saved $60,000 and bought a single DC-9 from a bankruptcy auction. Now Apex owned 214 aircraft, flew to 93 cities, employed 41,000 people, and I was the only person on Earth who knew that our CEO preferred to fly in hoodies. I reached for the casual outfit. The Zurich deal was too important to risk the optics of arriving wrinkled and jet-lagged in a suit. Novatech's board had given us a deadline. Sign the $215 million acquisition agreement by 8 a.m. Central European Time tomorrow or the deal collapsed. Their competitor, Stratus Aeronautics, was circling with a counteroffer. I needed to be sharp, alert, comfortable. And if I was honest with myself, the part of myself that still heard my father's Creole-accented English cutting through corporate doublespeak, I needed to remember what it felt like to be invisible. Power has a smell. It's cologne and leather and the particular musk of deference. When I walked into Apex headquarters in a suit, people's spines straightened. Assistants materialized with coffee I didn't ask for. Executives laughed at jokes that weren't funny. The world bent itself into pleasing shapes around me. But in a hoodie, I was just another black man trying to get somewhere. My father had made me promise 6 days before he died that I would fly commercial at least once a month. Not in Apex Signature Suites, our new lie-flat first-class product, but in regular cabins, middle seats when possible. You need to see what they see, Khan. You need to feel what they feel. The day you stop is the day you stop being useful. I hadn't kept that promise perfectly. In 10 months, I'd flown commercial 4 times, always in first class, always under my own name. But today felt different. Today I'd booked seat 1B on flight 847 under D. Kellen with no elite status flags, no CEO designation in the system. Just another passenger who'd paid full freight for a transatlantic seat. The iPad on my nightstand buzzed. 5 a.m., car service in 30 minutes. I dressed quickly, pulling the hoodie over a plain white t-shirt. The fabric was absurdly soft, woven from some Peruvian wool that cost more per yard than most people's monthly rent. But it looked generic, unremarkable. That was the point. Downstairs, I made coffee in the French press my father had used every morning for 3 decades. The kitchen was ridiculous. Sub-zero appliances, Calacatta marble countertops, a wine fridge I'd never filled. But this corner, with the old press and the chipped mug that said, "World's okayest dad," a gift from my daughter before the divorce, this corner was real. I opened my laptop to check the Novatech files one last time. Their CEO, Werner Albrecht was old-school Swiss, punctual, precise, allergic to ambiguity. The contract had been negotiated down to the semicolons. All that remained was signatures and a handshake. But Tristan Vaughn, SVP of Acquisitions at Stratos, had been making noise. I'd heard through back channels that he was in Zurich this week too. Coincidence seemed unlikely. Stratos had been trying to break into the European tech sector for years. Novatech's portfolio of aviation AI patents was exactly what they needed. My phone lit up. Car arriving in 2 minutes. I grabbed my carry-on, a simple black rollerboard, the kind you could buy at any airport kiosk, and headed out into the rain. The Lincoln Nautilus idled in the circular driveway, wipers beating a steady rhythm. The driver, a man in his 60s named Maurice, who'd been driving me for 3 years, stepped out with an umbrella. "Morning, Dr. Kellen, JFK." "Morning, Maurice. Yes, but just drop me at departures. I'll check in myself." His eyebrows rose a fraction. In 3 years, I'd never checked myself in. But he simply nodded and opened the rear door. Seattle vanished behind us in a blur of gray sky and Douglas firs. I-5 was mercifully empty at this hour. Maurice navigated in silence, occasionally glancing at me in the rearview mirror with the expression of a man who'd learned that billionaires were eccentric and questions were unwelcome. We arrived at SeaTac at 6:02. I tipped Maurice $200 cash. He tried to refuse, I insisted, and walked into the terminal alone. The departures hall smelled like Starbucks and anxiety. Families dragged oversized luggage toward check-in kiosks. Business travelers in rumpled suits stabbed at their phones. A toddler screamed in the cadence of air raid sirens while her mother murmured useless reassurances. No one looked at me twice. I found the Apex Airways kiosk and scanned my boarding pass from my phone. The machine beeped. A young agent with a name tag reading Sandra Pemberton materialized at my elbow. "Sir, I'll need to verify this at the counter." Her tone was pleasant, professional, but there was something underneath it, a particular kind of scrutiny I'd learned to recognize in my 48 years of living in this skin. I followed her to the premium check-in desk. She took my phone, scanned the QR code 3 times, frowned at her screen. "This ticket is showing as Apex First. That's our premium transatlantic product." "Yes. Did you purchase this yourself or was it a company ticket?" The question landed soft, innocent, but I'd heard variations of it my entire life. "Did you earn this or was it given to you? Do you really belong here or are you visiting someone else's world?" "I purchased it, full fare." Sandra's smile tightened at the corners. "I see. It's just unusual well, we don't usually see this class of ticket at the kiosk. Most of our premium passengers use the premium check-in lane." She gestured to a roped-off area 20 feet away where a white woman in Lululemon was being handed sparkling water by an obsequious agent. "I prefer this lane." "Of course." Sandra's fingers flew across her keyboard. "I'll just need 2 forms of ID and the credit card you used to purchase." Behind me, a white man in a Patagonia vest cleared his throat impatiently. Sandra had waved him through 60 seconds ago without asking for anything beyond his boarding pass. I pulled out my driver's license and the Amex Centurion card. Sandra examined both with the intensity of a gemologist inspecting a potential counterfeit. She held the metal card up to the light, ran her finger over the embossed name. "One moment, sir." She picked up a phone, spoke in a low voice to someone I couldn't hear. 90 seconds passed, then 2 minutes. The man in the Patagonia vest huffed and moved to another kiosk. Sandra hung up and returned my cards with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Everything checks out. You're all set, Mr. Kellen. Enjoy your flight." No apology for the delay, no acknowledgement of the double standard, just the transaction completed and me dismissed. I headed towards security, counting in my head. 1, TSA pre-check was supposed to be expedited. But Officer Brooks Martinez, a man whose mustache suggested a personal attachment to 1987, pulled me aside at the metal detector. "Random additional screening, sir. Step over here." Nothing about this was random. I'd watched him wave through a dozen passengers, all white, all unchallenged. But I stepped into the plexiglass box and raised my arms while he patted down my hoodie with unnecessary thoroughness. "Bag on the table, please." I lifted my carry-on onto the stainless steel surface. Martinez unzipped it with the slow deliberation of a man who enjoyed this. He pulled out my iPad Pro. "This yours?" "Yes." "Proof of purchase?" "I don't carry receipts for 3-year-old devices." Martinez's eyes narrowed. He pulled out my leather notebook, a Mont Blanc my daughter had given me for my 45th birthday, flipped through the pages as if looking for contraband hidden between meeting notes and acquisition strategies. "Sir, I'm going to need you to power on all electronic devices." Around me, other passengers glided through without a second glance. A white businessman in a rumpled Oxford shirt walked past with a laptop bag and a tablet and a Nintendo Switch visible through the mesh pocket. No one asked him to power anything on. I unlocked the iPad. Martinez stared at the home screen, email, calendar, Bloomberg terminal, as if it might spontaneously confess to a crime. He handed it back without a word and continued excavating my luggage. 5 minutes became 8. 8 became 10. A small crowd had formed behind me, their collective irritation pressing against my back like a physical weight. Finally, Martinez re-zipped my bag and nodded toward the exit. "You're clear. Have a nice flight." No apology, no acknowledgement. Just me and my belongings in the eyes of 60 strangers who'd watched a black man get the full treatment while they breezed through. 2. The Centurion Lounge was supposed to be my reprieve. I'd been a platinum member since Apex had partnered with the credit card company 8 years ago. My status was so high I could bring 3 guests and access any lounge globally without question. But when I approached the reception desk, the young man behind it, name tag reading Bryce Hollis, looked at me the way a bouncer looks at a fake ID. "Sir, this lounge is for platinum members only." I pulled up the app on my phone, showed him the digital card with my name and the unmistakable platinum designation. Bryce squinted at the screen. Let me verify this." He picked up a phone, dialed a number, spoke in hushed tones while I stood at the threshold like a supplicant awaiting judgment. Other passengers flowed past me into the lounge, a woman in a Tory Burch dress, a man in a Brooks Brothers suit, a teenager in ripped jeans and a Supreme hoodie who looked maybe 17. None of them were stopped. Bryce hung up. "Okay, you're verified. Go ahead." No apology, no thank you for your patience. Just a curt nod and me granted entry to a space I'd been entitled to all along. I found a seat in the corner away from the crowd, ordered a coffee from a passing attendant who seemed surprised that I knew what a cortado was. The leather chair was comfortable. The coffee was excellent, but my jaw ached from clenching. 3. Across the lounge I spotted a familiar face. Tristan Vaughn, SVP of Acquisitions at Stratos Aeronautics, sat in a high-backed chair near the window, laptop open, phone pressed to his ear. He was 42, white, the kind of handsome that came from good genetics and better dermatologists. His suit was Tom Ford, his watch was Patek Philippe. His entire presentation screamed Master of the Universe. We'd met twice at industry conferences. Both times he'd spoken to me with the condescension of a man who assumed anyone black in aviation was either a pilot or a diversity hire. Tristan glanced up, saw me, and his gaze slid past without recognition. I was wearing a hoodie, therefore I was invisible. He stood, grabbed his leather briefcase, and walked within 3 feet of me on his way out. Close enough that I heard him on the phone. I don't care what Kellen's offering, we'll beat it. I'll close Werner in person. My stomach tightened. Tristan was going to Zurich, going to Novatech, going to try to steal my deal. I checked my watch, 7:40. Boarding started in 20 minutes. The gate area for Flight 847 was a study in controlled chaos. Families jockeyed for space near the podium. Elite status passengers clustered in the priority boarding lane. Everyone else formed a shapeless mass of humanity waiting for their zone to be called. I stood off to the side watching. A gate agent announced pre-boarding for passengers with disabilities and families with small children. Then Group 1, Apex Elite Diamond and Apex First passengers. I joined the line. The woman in front of me wore a Burberry trench coat and carried a Chanel bag. The man behind me had AirPods Max and the restless energy of someone who flew 300,000 miles a year. We shuffled forward in silence. I reached the podium. The agent, the same Sandra Pemberton from check-in, scanned my boarding pass. Her screen beeped. "Sir, this shows seat 1B. Is that correct?" "Yes." She looked at me, looked at the screen, looked at me again. "First class is to the left when you board." "I know. It's just, we want to make sure passengers are in the correct cabin." Behind me, the man with the AirPods sighed audibly. Sandra waved me through with visible reluctance. I walked down the jet bridge, feeling the familiar thrum of anticipation. Flying never got old. Even after 1,000 flights, the moment before stepping onto an aircraft still carried a hint of magic. The forward door was open. A flight attendant in an Apex uniform stood at the entrance, smiling the professional smile of someone who'd perfected the expression through repetition. "Welcome aboard." I stepped into first class. The cabin was stunning. We'd redesigned it 6 months ago. 1-2-1 configuration, enclosed suites with doors, lie-flat beds, ambient lighting that shifted from energizing blue to sleep-inducing amber. Each suite had a 23-inch entertainment screen, wireless charging, and enough personal space to forget you were in a metal tube at 39,000 feet. Seat 1A, the window suite, was occupied by Tristan Vaughn. He was typing furiously on a laptop, a glass of champagne already perspiring on his tray table. He didn't look up as I moved past him to 1B, the aisle suite. I stowed my carry-on in the overhead bin and settled into the seat. The leather was butter soft. The suite smelled faintly of lavender and new car. I pressed the button to close the privacy door and felt a small measure of tension drain from my shoulders. Then I heard her voice. "Good afternoon, sir. May I see your boarding pass?" I looked up. The flight attendant standing at my suite was in her early 50s, white, with silver blonde hair pulled into an immaculate bun. Her name tag read, Lenore Hastings, Senior Purser. She was smiling, but the smile had a particular quality I recognized, polite suspicion. I pulled up my boarding pass on my phone and handed it to her. Lenore examined it, turned the phone slightly to catch the light as if checking for evidence of forgery. Her eyes flicked from the screen to my face and back again. "This is showing seat 1B, first class." "Yes." "Are you certain you're in the correct cabin?" The question was asked gently, almost maternally, but underneath it was the assumption that I'd wandered into the wrong section. That someone like me, in a hoodie, in sneakers, in skin this shade of brown, couldn't possibly belong here. "I'm certain," Lenore's smile tightened. "I see. It's just unusual. We don't typically see... Well, let me verify this with the gate." She disappeared before I could respond. I sat in my $11,000 suite, surrounded by luxury I'd personally approved in design meetings, and felt the old familiar anger rising in my chest. In the suite next to me, Tristan Vaughn glanced over. Our eyes met for the first time. His gaze traveled from my hoodie to my sneakers and back up to my face. Then he turned away without a word, as if I were wallpaper. 4 minutes passed, then 5. Other passengers filed past, settling into their suites. A couple in their 60s in 2A and 2B. A woman in business attire in 3A. Everyone white. Everyone waved through without question. Lenore returned, her smile now absent. "Everything checks out, Mr. Kellen. My apologies for the delay." The apology was pro forma, hollow. But I nodded and she moved on to greet Tristan with warmth that felt genuine. "Mr. Vaughn, wonderful to see you again. Your usual McAllen 25? Tristan's face transformed. "Lenore, you remember, you're a treasure." "Of course, sir. I never forget our valued guests." She didn't ask me what I wanted to drink, simply moved past my suite as if I'd become invisible the moment my boarding pass had been verified. I closed the privacy door and exhaled slowly. My father's voice returned, unbidden. "Konoi, every time they make you prove you belong, you're teaching them they have the right to demand proof. But sometimes the lesson they need isn't the one you can give in that moment. Sometimes you just count to 10. I was at 7, the cabin filled. An announcement chimed. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Apex Airways Flight 847 with non-stop service to Zurich. We'll be departing shortly. Please ensure all carry-on items are stowed and your seatbelts are fastened." Lenore appeared with a tray of pre-departure beverages. She stopped at Tristan's suite first. "Mr. Vaughn, you're McAllen. And shall I arrange for the chef to prepare your dinner once we're airborne? I believe you prefer the filet?" Tristan accepted the crystal tumbler with the ease of someone accustomed to personal service. "You're too good to me, Lenore. Yes, the filet, medium rare. And let's start with the lobster bisque." "Excellent choice, sir." Lenore turned to my suite. Her smile returned, but it was different, performative. "And for you, sir, we have water, of course, complimentary. Or we have Sprite, orange juice, ginger ale." The omission was deliberate. She'd offered Tristan a 25-year-old single malt without asking. She was offering me soft drinks. Lagavulin 16, neat. Lenore's eyebrows rose a fraction. "That's a premium selection. Are you familiar with Islay Scotch?" The question landed like a slap, the assumption that I couldn't possibly know what I'd ordered, that I was posturing, that I needed her permission to drink expensive whiskey. "Very familiar. I'll check if we have it available." She knew exactly what was available. She'd been pouring drinks in first class for what I'd later learn was 28 years, but she disappeared anyway, leaving me to marinate in the implication that I'd requested something beyond my station. 3 minutes later, she returned with a rocks glass filled with amber liquid. She set it on my tray table with more force than necessary. Scotch sloshed over the rim and pooled on the polished wood surface. She tossed a cocktail napkin toward the spill without meeting my eyes. I stared at the spreading liquid. Lagavulin 16, $120 a bottle retail, soaking into a napkin because a flight attendant on my own airline had decided I wasn't worth basic courtesy. 8. The engines spooled up, the cabin lights dimmed to their departure setting. I pulled out the paperback I'd been reading for 3 months, a battered copy of The Remains of the Day that my father had annotated in the margins with observations about dignity and service. The plane pushed back from the gate. I felt the familiar sensation of movement, the tug pulling us away from the terminal and out toward the taxiway. 30 minutes until wheels up, 7 hours and 40 minutes to Zurich. I opened my book and tried to read, but the words blurred. My father's handwriting appeared in the margin of page 47. "Stevens believes dignity requires silence, but silence in the face of injustice isn't dignity. It's complicity." The plane turned onto the taxiway. Through the window, I could see the Seattle skyline disappearing into low clouds. I closed my eyes and counted. 8, 9. The intercom chimed. The captain's voice, deep and authoritative with a faint southern drawl, filled the cabin. "Good morning, folks. This is Captain Pierce Whitmore. We've got a smooth ride ahead of us today. Flight time to Zurich is 7 hours and 38 minutes. We'll be cruising at 39,000 feet. Sit back, relax, and let my crew take care of you." The engines roared. The plane surged forward. I felt the acceleration press me back into the seat, and somewhere in the back of my mind a voice whispered that the counting wasn't done. We weren't even airborne yet. The wheels left concrete at 7:53 a.m. Pacific time. I felt the familiar lurch in my stomach as the landing gear retracted and the plane banked east over Lake Washington. Through the window, my city became a watercolor of gray and green, then vanished entirely into cloud cover. Lenore appeared in the aisle with a linen-covered cart. The smell of fresh-baked bread and coffee filled the cabin. She stopped at Tristan's suite first, her voice dropping to the warm register reserved for valued guests. "Mr. Vaughn, I have the breakfast service ready whenever you'd like. Chef has prepared the smoked salmon with capers and creme fraiche, or we have the Mediterranean frittata with heirloom tomatoes." Tristan barely looked up from his laptop. "Just coffee for now, Lenore. I'll eat in an hour." "Of course, sir. The Papua New Guinea single origin you enjoyed last time?" "Perfect." She poured from a silver carafe, the stream of dark liquid arcing into bone china with practiced precision. Set the cup on his table with a smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. Then she turned to my suite. The smile flattened into something professional and distant. "For you, sir, we have chicken or pasta for the main meal service. Most passengers prefer the chicken." The phrasing landed wrong. Not most passengers enjoy or the chicken is popular. Most passengers prefer, most passengers like you. "I'll have the Wagyu filet, medium rare." Lenore's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "The Wagyu is reserved for our elite tier members, sir." "I am elite tier. Check the manifest." "Sir, I don't appreciate having my procedures questioned." Her voice had risen half an octave. In the suite beside me, Tristan glanced over with the expression of someone watching a mild inconvenience unfold. "I'm not questioning your procedures. I'm ordering a meal I'm entitled to. The system shows you as a standard first-class passenger, not elite." This was a lie. I knew it was a lie because I'd personally reviewed the passenger manifest integration protocols when we'd upgraded our reservation system 18 months ago. Elite status flagged automatically, but arguing would prove nothing except that I was, in her eyes, difficult. "Then I'll have the chicken." Lenore's expression shifted to something resembling satisfaction. She moved down the aisle without offering coffee. I pulled out my phone, toggled airplane mode off long enough to fire off a text to Priya Malhotra, our general counsel. "Run a full audit on flight attendant complaint procedures. Want to see dismissed cases from the last 10 years. High priority." The message sent just as we climbed through 10,000 feet and connectivity dropped. I switched the phone back to airplane mode and tucked it away. 9. The seatbelt sign chimed off. Around the cabin, passengers began to move. Someone headed toward the lavatory. A woman in row 3 pulled out a tablet. Tristan stood, stretched, and opened the overhead bin to retrieve something from his briefcase. I pulled out my battered paperback and tried to focus on the words, but Lenore's voice kept cutting through my concentration, bright and solicitous as she attended to every passenger except me. "Mrs. Chen, how is your daughter doing at Dartmouth?" "Mr. Phillips, I have that Japanese whiskey you mentioned last month." "Ms. Rodriguez, the blanket warmer is in the cabinet if you'd like to rest." 20 minutes into the flight, I needed the lavatory. I stood, stepped into the aisle, and immediately Tristan called out from his suite. "Excuse me, Lenore?" She materialized instantly. "Yes, Mr. Vaughn?" "This passenger just stepped on my foot." I turned. Tristan was looking directly at me, his expression a perfect blend of annoyance and certainty that he would be believed. "I'm nowhere near your suite." Tristan addressed Lenore as if I hadn't spoken. "I have sciatica. Doctor's orders to keep my legs elevated. I need more space. Can you ask him to be more careful?" Lenore turned to me. her face arranged in bureaucratic concern. "Sir, please be mindful of other passengers' personal space." I didn't touch his suite. "Nevertheless, Mr. Vaughn is a valued guest. I'm sure you understand." She waited, expectant for me to apologize for an offense I hadn't committed. The seconds stretched. Other passengers were watching now. A man across the aisle had lowered his noise-canceling headphones. I walked to the lavatory without another word. Inside the cramped space, I stared at myself in the mirror. The fluorescent lighting made my brown skin look ashen. There was tension around my eyes I didn't usually see. My father's face looked back at me, the resemblance stronger now than it had been when he was alive. "Con oi," his voice whispered from memory. "They will test you in small ways first. They want to see if you'll accept the small humiliations, because if you do, the large ones become easier." I splashed cold water on my face and returned to my suite. Tristan had reclined my seat into its fully flat position. His laptop and papers were spread across my tray table. He was working, comfortable and expansive, occupying both his suite and half of mine. "Excuse me, that's my seat." Tristan looked up as if noticing me for the first time. "I have a medical condition, lower back issues. My doctor prescribed elevation and workspace. You can use the crew rest area. I'm sure they won't mind." The crew rest area was a jump seat in the galley. He was telling me to sit in the back with the staff while he colonized my $11,000 seat. "This is my seat. I paid for it. Please return it to the upright position. I paid $14,000 for this flight. I think I've earned a little extra consideration." He hadn't moved. His fingers continued typing on the laptop that rested on my table. "Mr. Vaughn, I need you to return my seat. And I need you to stop harassing me." He raised his voice on the last word. Heads turned throughout the cabin. Lenore appeared instantly, summoned by the magic of a white man's distress. "Mr. Vaughn, is everything all right? This man is harassing me. He's been hovering over my suite, making aggressive demands. I feel unsafe." The word unsafe did its work. Lenore's expression hardened into protective concern for Tristan and defensive suspicion toward me. "Sir," she addressed me with the clipped tone of final warnings, "I need you to return to your seat and stop bothering Mr. Vaughn." "I'm trying to return to my seat. He's occupying it. Mr. Vaughn has a documented medical condition. I have a documented reservation for seat 1B. Sir, you need to lower your voice." I hadn't raised my voice. The accusation was designed to paint me as aggressive, to justify whatever came next. I could feel the moment calcifying into narrative. Angry black man threatens white passenger. "I am calm. I'm asking for the seat I paid for. You're being disruptive. If you don't comply, I will have to call the captain." "Then call the captain." Lenore's eyes flashed. She turned on her heel and marched toward the cockpit. Tristan resumed typing, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. I stood in the aisle of my own aircraft, surrounded by luxury I had approved, watched by passengers I was responsible for transporting safely, and felt the crushing weight of invisibility. The cockpit door opened. Captain Pierce Whitmore emerged, tall and silver-haired, with the kind of weathered handsomeness that inspired confidence in nervous flyers. He was 58 years old. I knew this because I'd personally reviewed his file when we'd promoted him to captain 6 years ago. Exemplary safety record, 35 years of experience, zero tolerance for disruption. He approached with the measured gait of authority, his 4-stripe epaulets catching the cabin light. "Sir, I'm Captain Whitmore. What seems to be the problem?" Before I could respond, Lenore spoke. "Captain, this passenger has been aggressive toward Mr. Vaughn, threatening behavior. Mr. Vaughn feels unsafe." Whitmore's gaze shifted to Tristan, who had adopted an expression of weary resignation. "Captain, I hate to make a fuss, but this individual has been hovering, making demands, raising his voice. I have a heart condition. Stress is dangerous for me." The heart condition was new. It had evolved from sciatica in the span of 2 minutes. But Whitmore was nodding, his face settling into the configuration of a man who'd heard enough. "Sir," he addressed me without asking my version of events. "On my aircraft, my crew's word is final. If Ms. Hastings says you're being disruptive, then you're being disruptive." "Captain, I haven't been disruptive. Mr. Vaughn has taken over my seat. I'm simply asking for what I paid for. My crew has 28 years of experience. You've been on this plane less than an hour. I suggest you sit down and stop making trouble." The dismissal was absolute. My version of reality didn't matter. My truth was irrelevant. Lenore's word and Tristan's performance had written the story, and I was simply the antagonist in their narrative. "Captain, I'm being discriminated against." The word hung in the air like smoke. Passengers shifted in their seats. Someone coughed. Whitmore's expression didn't change, but something cold entered his eyes. "That's a serious accusation, sir. Do you have proof? 60 people just watched your crew ignore my request while accommodating his. What I see is a passenger causing a scene. Now you have 2 choices. Sit down and behave, or I will have you restrained and we'll deal with this on the ground in Zurich. Your choice." The threat was clear: comply or face consequences, accept humiliation or escalate to violence. I looked at Tristan, who had returned to his laptop with the satisfied air of a man who'd won. I looked at Lenore, whose face held the righteous certainty of someone who knew the system would protect her. I looked at Whitmore, whose authority was absolute and unquestionable at 39,000 feet. And I made a choice my father would have understood. "I'd like to make a phone call." Whitmore's eyebrows rose. "You can call from the FBI office in Zurich. Federal law entitles me to 1 call. I'm requesting it now. Sir, we are in flight. Phone calls are not... The FCC permits phone calls on aircraft. I'm making one." The technical accuracy of this statement was debatable, but I said it with enough conviction that Whitmore hesitated. Behind him, Lenore whispered something I couldn't hear. He nodded. "Fine. 1 call. Supervised. And then you sit down and you stay down." I pulled out my phone, disabled airplane mode, and watched the signal bars climb as we connected to the aircraft's satellite system. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was using technology I'd personally funded the installation of, on an aircraft I owned, to call someone who could prove I wasn't who they thought I was. I dialed the second number in my favorites list. It rang twice. "Dominic, where are you?" Edmund Thorne's voice was warm and familiar. We'd known each other for 40 years, since my father had hired his father to handle Apex's early regulatory filings. Edmund had gone on to chair the FAA. We'd stayed close through the decades, bound by family history and mutual respect. "Edmund, I'm on flight 847. They assaulted me. I need you to ground it." The warmth drained from his voice, replaced by sharp focus. "Jesus Christ, you're on a flight? Which airline?" "Apex 847, JFK to Zurich. They beat me, Edmund. Blood, restraints, the works." A pause. I could almost hear the gears turning in his mind as he processed the impossible information. "You're telling me you're on an Apex flight, your airline, and someone assaulted you?" "The crew, Captain Pierce Whitmore, Senior Purser Lenore Hastings, they didn't know who I was or they didn't care." "Dom, I need you to ground this flight right now. Turn us around." Another pause, longer. I could hear voices in the background, the ambient noise of the FAA headquarters operations center. "Dominic, if I do this, it's going to create a situation." "Good, I want a situation." "All right, give me 90 seconds. The line went dead. Whitmore had been watching me throughout the call, his expression cycling through skepticism and irritation. Now he held out his hand. "I'll need to see that phone, sir. Verify who you called." I powered it off and slipped it into my pocket. "You'll see soon enough." 60 seconds later, the cockpit radio crackled. I couldn't hear the transmission, but I saw Whitmore's face change. Confusion, then alarm, then something approaching fear. He strode back to the cockpit without a word to me. The door opened and closed. Through the gap, I glimpsed the first officer's startled expression. 90 seconds after that, the plane banked hard left. The turn was aggressive enough that passengers gasped. Coffee sloshed in cups. A laptop slid off a tray table in row 4. Whitmore's voice came over the intercom, tight and controlled. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Whitmore. We've received instructions from Air Traffic Control to return to JFK immediately. This is due to regulatory issues. We apologize for the inconvenience and will provide updates as we have them." The cabin erupted. Passengers demanded explanations. A woman in row 3 started crying. A businessman shouted about a meeting in Zurich he couldn't miss. Lenore rushed past me toward the cockpit, her face drained of color. She knocked on the reinforced door. It opened a crack. Whitmore's voice, low and urgent. "I don't know. FAA chairman himself. Direct order." The door closed. Lenore turned and saw me watching. Something flickered across her face, not recognition, not yet, but the first stirring of doubt. Tristan had abandoned his laptop and was pressing his face to the window, watching the plane execute a wide turn back toward Seattle. The sun was behind us now, casting long shadows through the cabin. "What the hell is going on?" he muttered to no one in particular. I returned to my suite and sat down. My hands were trembling, not from fear, from the effort of maintaining composure when every cell in my body wanted to scream. The flight attendants had gathered in the galley, their voices a low murmur of speculation and anxiety. I caught fragments. "Never seen this before, and someone important must be on board, and do you think it's terrorism?" The plane began its descent. The seatbelt sign chimed on. Whitmore's voice returned, brittle with forced calm. "Flight attendants, prepare the cabin for landing." We dropped through 20,000 feet, 15,000. The Seattle skyline emerged from the clouds, familiar and strange. We'd been in the air less than 40 minutes. At 5,000 feet, I looked out the window and saw them. 6 black Escalades and a convoy on the tarmac, positioned near a holding area away from the terminals. 3 NYPD cruisers. No, I corrected myself. King County Sheriff vehicles, wrong city. 2 ambulances, a cluster of people in dark suits. The plane touched down hard, tires squealing. Whitmore hit the brakes with more force than necessary. We decelerated rapidly, the reverse thrusters roaring. As we taxied past the main terminal, I saw faces pressed against the windows of gates, watching our unexpected return. Phones were out, recording. This would be on social media within minutes. We stopped on a remote section of tarmac, far from passenger traffic. Through the window, I could see the welcoming committee approaching. The convoy had begun to move toward us. Whitmore's voice, stripped now of all pretense at calm. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. We're waiting for clearance from ground operations." Lenore stood in the aisle, gripping a seatback, her knuckles white. She was staring at the vehicles outside, trying to process what this meant. Tristan had gone pale. His CEO performance had evaporated, replaced by genuine confusion. "This doesn't make sense," he whispered. "Regulatory issues don't trigger this kind of response." The forward door opened with a hiss of pressurization. I heard voices before I saw faces. Authoritative, urgent, female. Then Priya Malhotra burst into the cabin like a force of nature barely contained in a tailored suit. She was 45, Indian, with silver streaking her black hair and the kind of presence that made senior partners straighten their spines. Behind her came Leon Whitaker, our COO, and Isabel Ramos, VP of Human Resources. Behind them, Edmund Thorne in his FAA chairman capacity, looking grim. Priya's eyes swept the cabin, cataloging every detail until they locked on me. She went very still. Her face cycled through shock, recognition, and volcanic rage in the space of a heartbeat. "Dr. Kellen." Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the length of the cabin. Every passenger turned to look at me. Priya strode down the aisle, her heels clicking on the deck. She stopped at the galley where Marshal Garrett Stone stood. I hadn't even noticed the air marshal until now. Hadn't registered his presence during the earlier confrontation. He was 35, muscular, with the buzz cut and bearing of ex-military. "Where is he?" Priya demanded. Stone looked confused. "Ma'am, who are you?" "I'm the General Counsel of Apex Airways. Where is Dr. Kellen?" "I don't." I stood up. Priya's eyes found me and widened. I saw her take in the details, the hoodie, the blood crusted on my temple from where my head had struck something during the earlier struggle I hadn't yet described to anyone, the purple discoloration on my wrists from zip ties I hadn't mentioned. Wait, there were no zip ties. There had been no physical struggle yet, but in Priya's eyes I saw the assumption of violence, and I realized with cold clarity that she had received a report that didn't match reality, unless reality was about to catch up with the story. "Dr. Kellen," Priya said, her voice shaking. "Are you injured?" "I'm fine." "You're bleeding." I touched my temple and my fingers came away red. I hadn't noticed. When had that happened? The overhead bin, when Whitmore had grabbed my arm to emphasize his authority, I'd stumbled backward. Priya turned to Stone with an expression that could melt steel. "Did you do this?" "Ma'am, I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't touched anyone." "Then who restrained Dr. Kellen?" "Nobody restrained." But Priya wasn't listening anymore. She was looking past him at Lenore, at Whitmore emerging from the cockpit, at the scene she'd constructed in her mind from Edmund's frantic call and her own worst fears about what happens when the CEO flies incognito. "All of you, off this aircraft. Now, you're suspended pending investigation." Whitmore found his voice. "I'm the captain of this aircraft. You can't. I'm the general counsel of the company that owns this aircraft. You're grounded, Captain, effective immediately." Lenore started to speak, but Priya cut her off with a gesture. "Not one word, not one, off, now." The two EMTs who'd boarded behind the executive team approached me. One was a young woman with kind eyes. She gestured to my temple. "Sir, let me look at that." I waved her off. "It's nothing." "With respect, sir, head wounds bleed a lot even when they're minor. Let me clean it." She had already opened her kit. I sat down and let her work. The cabin had gone silent except for the sound of medical supplies being unwrapped and Priya's clipped conversation with someone on her phone. The EMT dabbed at my temple with gauze soaked in something that stung. She was gentle but thorough. "You have a 2-centimeter laceration, doesn't need stitches, but it should be glued, may I?" I nodded. She applied surgical adhesive while the cabin watched. I could feel their eyes on me, the passengers processing this reversal. The man in the hoodie was someone important. Important enough to turn a plane around. Important enough to summon what looked like half of Seattle's emergency services. Lenore stood frozen near row 3, her face the color of old paper. Whitmore was speaking in low, urgent tones to someone on his phone. Tristan had pressed himself into his suite as if trying to disappear into the leather. The EMT finished her work and pressed a butterfly bandage over the glued wound. "All set. You should see your doctor when you get where you're going. Any dizziness, nausea, blurred vision?" "No." "All right. But if any of those symptoms develop, get medical attention immediately." She packed up her kit and joined her partner near the door. Priya ended her call and approached me. Up close, I could see the fury in her eyes, barely contained. "Dominic, tell me what happened. Everything." I glanced at the cabin full of passengers, all listening. "Not here." "Then come with me. Leon's brought the car." I stood, retrieved my carry-on from the overhead bin. Every movement felt weighted with significance now. The man in the hoodie collecting his bag. The man whose phone call had reversed physics and brought a 787 back to Earth. I walked down the aisle. Passengers shrank back as I passed, as if I'd transformed from invisible to radioactive. Near row 5, I passed a woman I hadn't noticed before. She was black, early 30s, holding an iPhone that was clearly recording. Our eyes met. She gave the smallest nod. Solidarity or documentation, I couldn't tell. Maybe both. I reached the forward door and paused, turned back to face the cabin. 60 pairs of eyes watched me, waiting. The words came without planning. My name is Dr. Dominic Kellen. My father Solomon founded Apex Airways 47 years ago. He died 10 months ago and I inherited his company. I am your CEO. I pointed at Lenore. You asked if I belonged here. I don't just belong, I own here. Then at Whitmore. You said on my aircraft. Correction, Captain, on my aircraft. Finally at Tristan. And you, sir, claim to know powerful people who would validate your importance. Edmund Thorne is my father's oldest friend. He works for aviation safety, not for you. The silence was absolute. I walked off the plane into the gray Seattle morning, leaving behind a cabin full of people who would never see a hoodie the same way again. Outside, the media had arrived. I could see news vans in the distance, telephoto lenses tracking our movements. The story was already writing itself. Priya fell into step beside me as we walked toward the escalades. Jesus Christ, Dom. When Edmund called and said you'd been assaulted, I thought, I know what you thought. But you weren't. I mean, the cut is real, but not yet. I stopped walking, looked at her. But I would have been, if I'd pushed harder, if I'd refused to back down. Stone was ready, they all were. I could see it in their eyes. Priya's jaw tightened. We're going to burn them down, all of them. I don't care if Whitmore's been with us for 35 years. I don't care if... I want an audit. Every passenger complaint against Lenore Hastings for the past decade. Every incident report involving Whitmore. Every case that was dismissed without investigation. Already ordered it. Isabel's pulling files now. We reached the lead escalade. Leon stood by the open door, his face grave. Boss, glad you're okay. I clasped his shoulder. Thanks for coming. Priya said you were bleeding and the crew had turned on you. We thought... He didn't finish the sentence. I climbed into the back seat. The leather was cool and smooth. The door closed and the world muffled. Through the tinted windows, I could see Lenore and Whitmore and Stone being escorted to separate vehicles by people I recognized as our internal security team. Priya slid in beside me. I've scheduled an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. The PR team is drafting a statement, and I've already called the King County Prosecutor's Office. Charges? Assault, civil rights violations, false imprisonment if we can make it stick. Though since they technically didn't restrain you, they would have. That's enough. My phone buzzed, a text from Edmund. You okay? Media's already calling it the CEO who couldn't fly his own airline. I typed back, let them call it that. It's true. Another text, this one from a number I didn't recognize. Dr. Kellen, this is Aaliyah Monroe. I was in seat 5C. I recorded everything. The video is already at 400,000 views. Do you want me to take it down? I stared at the message. 400,000 people had already seen some version of what happened. By tonight, it would be millions. The story would metastasize across social media, each retelling adding or subtracting details until the truth was buried under layers of narrative. I typed, no, leave it up. The world needs to see this. Priya was reading over my shoulder. Smart. Control the narrative by not controlling it. Show the receipts. The Escalade began to move, pulling away from the aircraft. I looked back through the rear window. Flight 847 sat alone on the tarmac, door still open, passengers still aboard. They'd need to deplane them eventually, arrange alternative transportation to Zurich, compensate them for the delay, and investigate what had almost happened to me. What would have happened if I'd pushed just a little harder? If I'd refused Whitmore's order to sit down? If I'd made them act on their threats instead of making a phone call that revealed who I was? The answer sat in my chest like a stone. They would have restrained me, Stone would have cuffed me, too tight, cutting circulation. They would have dragged me to the galley, zip-tied me to a jump seat, and if I'd struggled, if I'd shown even the slightest resistance born of pain or fear or the basic human instinct to protect oneself, they would have called it aggression. The video would have shown a black man in a hoodie being subdued. The narrative would have written itself: disruptive passenger, threat to safety, justified use of force, and no one would have known that the man bleeding on the galley floor owned the sky he was flying through. My phone lit up again, this time a call. I didn't recognize the number but answered anyway. "Dr. Kellen, this is Mateo Vargas. I'm a federal judge, Ninth Circuit. I was on flight 847 in 2021 and had an incident with Ms. Hastings that I complained about. Your office dismissed my complaint. I'd like to testify about what I experienced." I closed my eyes. "Judge Vargas, yes. I'll have my general counsel contact you, thank you. Dr. Kellen, what you did back there, standing up at the end, that took courage. But what you're about to do, going after them publicly, that takes more. You're going to get pushback. They're going to call you vindictive, angry, playing the race card. You ready for that?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." He made a sound that might have been approval or recognition. "Good, because if you don't, the next person who looks like us and sits in first class might not own the company, and they'll need someone to have fought this fight first." The call ended. Priya was watching me, her expression unreadable. "How many?" I asked. "How many what? How many complaints like Judge Vargas's did we dismiss? How many people did Lenore humiliate who didn't have the power to fight back?" She looked out the window. "Isabel's preliminary count is 15 in the past decade, but that's just the ones who formally complained. How many didn't bother because they assumed nothing would change?" 15 people. 15 versions of what almost happened to me. 15 opportunities to stop this that we'd ignored because it was easier to side with the crew, to protect the system, to maintain the status quo. And I'd been the CEO for 10 months. Every one of those complaints had been dismissed on my watch or my father's. We'd failed them. I'd failed them. The Escalade turned onto the highway, merging into late morning traffic. Seattle slid past the windows, oblivious to the small apocalypse unfolding in a black SUV heading downtown. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Headquarters. I figured you'd want to be there when the files come in." I nodded. My head was beginning to throb where the EMT had glued the wound. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind exhaustion and a bone-deep anger I didn't trust myself to express. Priya's phone rang. She answered, listened, her face darkening. "When? How bad? Jesus, okay, stall them. I'll be there in 10. She ended the call and looked at me. "The media's outside headquarters. 20 reporters and counting. They want a statement." "What did you tell PR to say?" "That we're investigating an incident involving discrimination on Flight 847 and have suspended the crew pending review. But they're not going to wait for the official statement. They're going to manufacture the story whether we cooperate or not." I thought about Aaliyah's video, already metastasizing across the internet. The narrative was forming in real time, shaped by hashtags and hot takes and the thousand small ways that social media turned complex truth into digestible outrage. "Set up a press conference, 2 p.m. today. I'll do it myself." Priya's eyes widened. "Dom, are you sure? We can have the VP of Communications handle—" "No, this happened to me. I'll tell it. The lawyers are going to advise against—" "I don't care what the lawyers advise. I'm the CEO and I was assaulted by my own employees. If I hide behind PR statements, the story becomes about corporate spin. If I show my face and tell the truth, the story becomes about accountability." She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, but I'm prepping you first, and we're running every word past legal." The Escalade pulled into the underground parking garage of Apex headquarters, a gleaming tower of glass and steel in downtown Seattle that I'd commissioned 6 years ago. We took the private elevator to the 45th floor, the executive suite. The doors opened onto controlled chaos, Assistants rushed past with folders. Someone was shouting into a phone about flight rebookings. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see Isabel and a team of HR staff surrounded by laptops and what looked like printouts of complaint forms. Leon appeared at my elbow. "They're already here. 15 victims. Well, the ones we could reach so far. They started calling the moment the video went viral. 15 confirmed complaints. How many total do we think?" Isabel's estimate, based on pattern analysis and cross-referencing with flight manifests where Hastings was lead purser, maybe 40, maybe more. 40 people, 40 versions of humiliation and dismissal, 40 opportunities for the system to work. That it had failed. I walked into the conference room. The team looked up, their faces reflecting various states of shock and sympathy. Isabel stood and approached, her normally composed expression cracked with something that looked like guilt. "Dr. Kellen, I'm so sorry. If I'd known, if anyone had flagged the pattern. It's not your fault. The system was designed to protect the crew, to give them the benefit of the doubt. That's what it did. But 15 complaints were filed against thousands of flight attendants over 10 years. The system saw noise, not signal. It takes someone with pattern recognition to see what this was, and we didn't look." I sat down at the head of the table, suddenly aware of how exhausted I was. The adrenaline had fully drained now, leaving behind a fatigue that felt cellular. "Walk me through what you found." Isabel pulled up a presentation on the screen. 15 names, 15 faces, 15 stories. Dr. Imani Osei, questioned about her first-class ticket 3 times, then moved to economy mid-flight because another passenger complained about her offensive perfume. She'd missed a medical conference where she was the keynote speaker. Commander August Hayes, Navy officer in uniform, told his boots were unsuitable for first class and moved to economy at the request of Tristan Vaughn, the same Tristan Vaughn from Flight 847 this morning. The complaint was dismissed because Vaughn was a platinum member. Zara Bishara, 16 years old, Palestinian-American, flying alone to NYT for an admissions interview. Accused of stealing the first-class ticket, detained by police at the gate, missed the interview. Lost the scholarship. The complaint was dismissed because she had no proof of Lenore's specific wording. Each story was a hammer blow. Each one a mirror of what I'd experienced, except they'd had no phone call to make, no CEO card to play, no power to reverse the plane. By the time Isabel reached number 15, a pastor who'd been mocked for his accent and served with chopsticks despite ordering steak, I had to stand up and walk to the window. 45 floors below, Seattle went about its business. People walked to lunch. Cars navigated traffic. The world turned on its axis, indifferent to the small catastrophes playing out in glass towers. Behind me, Priya's voice. "Dominic, we need to prep for the press conference. You have 2 hours." I turned back to the room. "Cancel the press conference." Every head swiveled toward me. "Cancel it? I'm not doing a press conference. I'm doing something better." I called an all-hands company meeting for 4 p.m. Every employee, every department, headquarters staff, maintenance crews, gate agents, pilots, flight attendants. 41,000 people connected via live stream from 93 cities. The auditorium on the 3rd floor could hold 3,000 bodies. The rest would watch on screens in break rooms and crew lounges and cockpits between flights. Priya tried 3 times to talk me out of it. "Dominic, you need legal review. You need PR coaching. You need time to process what happened before you make public statements that could expose the company to liability." I was standing at the window of my office, watching the media vans multiply in the plaza below. 12 had become 20. Satellite dishes bloomed like mechanical flowers. I'm not making a statement, I'm telling the truth. The truth can be a weapon that cuts both ways. If you admit the company failed 15 people, 40. If you admit we failed 40 people, the lawsuits will bury us. Every passenger who ever felt slighted will come forward claiming discrimination. We're looking at hundreds of millions in settlements. Good, we deserve it. Leon spoke up from his position near the door. He'd been silent for the past hour, just watching me pace and think. She's right about the liability, Dom, but she's wrong about the response. If we try to minimize this, if we lawyers speak our way around what happened, we look guilty and cowardly. If you own it completely, if you make it clear that this ends now and heads will roll, we control the narrative. Priya turned on him. Control the narrative? Have you seen social media? We lost control the moment that video hit the internet. It's at 8 million views. 8 million. People are calling for a boycott. The hashtag boycott Apex is trending #2 nationwide. Let it trend, I said. Let them see what we were, and then let them see what we're going to become. Isabel entered carrying a tablet, her face drawn. We've reached 22 victims willing to testify, and I've pulled Lenore's personnel file, 28 years with the company. 64 commendations for excellent service. 7 complaints, all dismissed. The complaints were flagged as passenger misunderstandings or cultural sensitivity issues that were addressed through mandatory training. Did she complete the training? Yes. Certificate dated 3 months after each complaint, but the training was online, self-paced. Anyone could click through in 15 minutes without retaining anything. I thought about Lenore's face when she'd offered me soft drinks while pouring Tristan his scotch. The practiced dismissal, the casual cruelty perfected over decades. This wasn't ignorance that could be trained away. This was belief calcified into habit. What about Whitmore? 35 years. Impeccable safety record. But I found something interesting. Every single one of Lenore's complaints was on a flight where Whitmore was captain. He personally dismissed 6 of the 7, citing crew discretion and no evidence of wrongdoing. The pattern was clear. Lenore had operated with impunity because Whitmore had protected her, and Whitmore had protected her because the system was designed to defer to crew judgment, to trust authority, to assume that passengers, especially passengers who didn't fit the first-class mold, were the problem. Stone? I asked. He's trickier, only been with us 18 months, former Marine, exemplary record with the Air Marshal Service. But here's the thing. He was assigned to Flight 847 specifically. It wasn't random. What do you mean? Isabel pulled up a document on her tablet. Air marshals are assigned based on threat assessment algorithms. Flight 847 had no flags, no reason to warrant a marshal, but Stone's assignment came through with a special code, priority protection for a high-value passenger. Tristan Vaughn. Exactly. Vaughn requested enhanced security, said he'd received threats related to the Stratus Novatech deal. So Stone was there to protect him, which means when Vaughn claimed you were making him feel unsafe, Stone was primed to see me as the threat. The machinery of discrimination was more intricate than I'd realized. It wasn't just prejudice. It was systems and policies and protection details all aligning to paint me as the danger and Tristan as the victim. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Dr. Kellen, this is Aaliyah Monroe again. My video is at 12 million views. News outlets are asking for interviews. What should I tell them? I called her. She picked up on the first ring. Dr. Kellen, I wasn't sure you'd call back. Ms. Monroe, I want to thank you for recording what happened, for not looking away. It was instinct. I'm a tech worker. I document everything, but when I saw what they were doing to you, when I heard the way they spoke to you, I knew this was bigger than just bad service. The video you posted, did you edit it at all? No, it's raw footage, start to finish, from when Lenore first questioned your boarding pass until you walked off the plane. 12 minutes and 43 seconds. Will you testify about what you witnessed? A pause. I heard voices in the background, someone asking if she wanted coffee. Dr. Kellen, I'm a black woman in tech. I know what it costs to speak up. I've seen people get branded as troublemakers for less. But I'll testify, because if you, a billionaire CEO, can get treated like that, what chance do the rest of us have? Her words hit like a physical blow. She was right. If I, with all my power and resources, had almost been restrained and removed from my own aircraft, what happened to people who had no leverage, who had no phone call to make, who would simply be erased from the cabin and the conversation? Thank you, Ms. Monroe. My general counsel will be in touch to coordinate your testimony. One more thing, Dr. Kellen. The video, people are debating whether it's real. Some think it's staged. They can't believe this would happen on a plane in 2025. They think we've moved past this. We haven't. I know, but they need to hear it from you. The call ended. I looked at the clock. 3:27 p.m. 33 minutes until the all-hands meeting. Priya approached with a folder thick with documents. Talking points, approved by legal. Stay within these boundaries and we minimize exposure. I took the folder without opening it. I appreciate the work, but I'm not using these. Dominic, Priya, I love you like family. You've been my father's lawyer and mine for 20 years. But if I stand up there and recite corporate-approved talking points, I might as well not speak at all. This moment requires truth, not strategy. She looked at me for a long moment, then sighed. Your father would have said the same thing, right before he got us sued into bankruptcy. Twice. And both times he fought his way back because people believed he meant what he said. I need them to believe me now. I left my office and took the elevator down to the auditorium. The building was eerily quiet despite being full. Everyone was already in position, waiting. The elevator descended through floors of suspended breath. The doors opened onto the backstage area. I could hear the murmur of 3,000 people beyond the curtain. Someone handed me a microphone. A production assistant asked if I needed anything. Water, tea, a moment. I shook my head and walked onto the stage. The murmur died instantly. 3,000 faces turned toward me. On the screens mounted throughout the auditorium, I could see the split-screen feeds from other locations. A maintenance hangar in Phoenix, a crew lounge in Chicago, a cockpit in Denver where pilots had delayed pushback to watch. I looked out at them and saw my company, the people my father had hired and I had inherited. Mechanics and accountants and customer service agents and pilots and flight attendants who wore the same uniform Lenore wore, who flew with captains who believed what Whitmore believed. And I saw their faces asking the same question. Are you going to burn us all down to make a point? I spoke without notes. My name is Dominic Kellen. Most of you know me as the CEO who took over when my father died 10 months ago. Some of you knew him. Knew that Solomon Kellen started this company because he was tired of being told he didn't belong. Tired of watching people who looked like him get passed over. Tired of accepting that the sky was only for certain kinds of people. My voice echoed in the vast space. No one moved. This morning I boarded Flight 847 to Zurich. I was wearing a hoodie and sneakers. I wanted to fly like a regular passenger, to see what you all see, to understand what our customers experience. What I experienced instead was discrimination. Systematic, practiced, casual discrimination from our own crew. On the screens, I could see flight attendants shifting uncomfortably. Some were crying, some looked defiant. Senior Purser Lenore Hastings questioned my right to sit in first class 3 times. She offered me soft drinks while serving premium scotch to the white passenger next to me. She told me the Wagyu filet was reserved for elite tier members despite my status showing clearly on the manifest. When I asked for the meal I'd paid for, she accused me of being disruptive. I paused. Let that land. Captain Pierce Whitmore threatened to have me restrained because I asked for the seat I'd purchased. He took his crew's word without asking for mine. He told me that on his aircraft his authority was absolute. He was right. At 39,000 feet, a captain's authority is absolute, which means passengers have no recourse when that authority is wielded unjustly. The silence was total now. Even the feeds from remote locations showed frozen faces. I made a phone call. I used connections you don't have. I had the FAA chairman turn the plane around because I owned the company and I could. But what about the 40 other passengers who experienced the same treatment from the same crew over the past 10 years? What about Dr. Imani Ose, who missed her keynote speech? What about Zara Bashara, who lost her MIT scholarship because she was accused of stealing a ticket she'd paid for? What about Commander August Hayes, a decorated Navy officer who was moved to economy because another passenger didn't like his boots? I pulled out my phone and pulled up Aaliyah's video. Hit play. The audio filled the auditorium. Lenore's voice. "This is showing seat 1B, first class. Are you certain you're in the correct cabin?" My voice. "I'm certain." Lenore. "I see. It's just unusual. We don't typically see—" The video played for 30 seconds, enough to show the pattern, the doubt, the dismissal, the casual assumption that I didn't belong. I stopped it. 12 million people have watched this video. 12 million people now know that flying while black on Apex Airways could mean being questioned, dismissed, and threatened with restraints. This is not the company my father built. This is not the company we're going to be. I saw heads nodding in the audience, but I also saw resistance, arms crossed, jaws set. Some of you are thinking this is one incident, one crew member with outdated attitudes. Don't punish 41,000 employees for one person's mistake. I shook my head. This wasn't one person. This was a system. Lenore filed 64 commendations for excellent service while quietly discriminating against passengers who didn't fit her idea of first class. Whitmore dismissed every complaint against her, citing crew discretion. Our HR department processed 7 formal complaints and responded with online training modules that changed nothing. Every level of this company failed. I walked to the edge of the stage. Here's what's going to happen. Effective immediately, Lenore Hastings is terminated. Captain Whitmore is terminated. Air Marshal Stone's contract is terminated. 3 supervisors who dismissed complaints without investigation are terminated, and I'm firing myself. That got a reaction. Gasps, confused murmurs. On the screens, people leaned forward. Not permanently, but for the next 6 months, I'm stepping back from day-to-day operations. Leon Whitaker will serve as acting CEO while I work with Priya and Isabel to completely overhaul our complaint procedures. We're implementing third-party oversight. We're installing body cameras for flight attendants who volunteer to wear them. We're creating a passenger bill of rights that's enforceable, not aspirational. I paused, gathering the next thought. We're also setting up a $25 million fund for victims of discrimination, not just the 40 we've identified. Anyone who experienced bias on our aircraft and can document it will be compensated. No NDAs, no forced arbitration, just acknowledgement and restitution. Priya was going to murder me. We hadn't discussed any of this. But the words came from somewhere deeper than strategy. They came from the place that had watched my father build something beautiful and then seen it corrupted by the very systems meant to protect it. Some of you are flight attendants who've worked here for decades. You're scared. You're thinking, if they fire Lenore for this, what happens when a passenger complains about me? What if I make an honest mistake? I saw heads nodding. Fear was real. Here's the distinction. Mistakes are random. Patterns are intentional. If you treat passengers differently based on how they look, how they dress, the color of their skin, you're not making a mistake. You're making a choice, and that choice has no place on our aircraft. A hand went up in the third row. A flight attendant, maybe 30 years old, South Asian, trembling slightly. Yes? Dr. Kellen, with respect, some passengers are difficult. They're rude, demanding, entitled. Are we supposed to just accept abuse? No. You're supposed to have backup. You're supposed to have captains who listen to both sides. You're supposed to have procedures that protect you from genuine threats without giving you license to discriminate against people who make you uncomfortable. Another hand, an older white man, mechanic's uniform. Dr. Kellen, this sounds expensive. Body cameras, oversight boards, a $25 million fund. How do we pay for it without cutting jobs? We pay for it the same way we pay for safety equipment and maintenance and fuel. It's not optional. It's the cost of doing business with integrity. And if we can't afford integrity, we shouldn't be in business. The auditorium erupted. Not in applause, in argument. People turning to their neighbors, voices rising, the careful corporate silence shattered into genuine debate. I let it happen for 30 seconds, then raised my hand. The room quieted. I know some of you disagree with these changes. Some of you think I'm overreacting. Some think I'm throwing good people under the bus to score political points. You're entitled to those opinions. But this is not a democracy. This is an airline. And the safety of every passenger, not just their physical safety but their dignity, is non-negotiable. I looked directly into the nearest camera, speaking now to the people in remote locations who couldn't see my face but could hear my voice. My father used to say, you don't measure a company by how it treats its best customers. You measure it by how it treats the customers it's tempted to dismiss. By that measure, we failed. I failed. And I'm using every resource at my disposal to make sure we never fail that test again. I set down the microphone and walked off the stage. Behind me, the auditorium exploded into noise. Questions shouted. Applause from some corners, silence from others. I didn't look back. Priya was waiting backstage, her face a storm of emotions. $25 million, voluntary body cameras, firing yourself? Dominic, you just committed us to a course of action that the board hasn't approved, that legal hasn't vetted, that the board works for me. I'm the majority shareholder, and legal can vet it in real time because we're implementing it starting tomorrow. You can't? I can, and I am. Schedule an emergency board meeting for tonight. I'll present the plan and they'll approve it, or I'll dissolve the board and appoint new members who will. Leon appeared, slightly out of breath. The media caught wind of the all hands. They're demanding the recording. Do we release it? Yes, full video, no editing. Posted on every platform we have. Priya made a sound like a deflating balloon. You're going to give them ammunition to crucify us. They already have the ammunition. At least this way they see us taking responsibility instead of hiding behind PR spin. My phone buzzed continuously. Text messages piling up faster than I could read them. I glanced at a few. From Edmund Thorne. Saw the all hands video. Your father would be proud, also terrified, mostly proud. From an unknown number. Dr. Kellen, this is Imani Osei, the surgeon from 2019. Thank you, just thank you. From another unknown number. This is Commander Hayes. I'd given up on justice. You just gave it back. And one from a number I did recognize. Tristan Vaughn. Impressive performance. Too bad it won't save your Zurich deal. Werner signed with Stratos an hour ago. I win. I stared at that last message. The Novatech acquisition. I'd been so consumed with the crisis on Flight 847 that I'd completely forgotten about the $215 million deal that was supposed to close today. I called Werner Albrecht's direct line. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I tried his assistant. Same result. I tried the Novatech general number and was told that Herr Albrecht was in meetings and unavailable. Tristan had gotten there first, had probably landed in Zurich while I was turning my plane around, had walked into Werner's office with a counteroffer that was better, faster, cleaner than mine. No scandal, no boycotts, no CEO who'd just admitted to systemic discrimination on live television. I'd lost the deal. Leon was watching me. Bad news? Novatech signed with Stratos. Tristan Vaughn closed it while I was dealing with this. Shit. That's a huge loss. It's a $215 million loss, and it's going to tank our stock price when the market opens tomorrow. Priya pulled out her phone, already texting someone. I'll get the investor relations team on damage control. We can spin this as, no spin. We tell the truth. We pursued an acquisition. We got outbid. We lost. It happens. Dominic, The optics are terrible. You turn a plane around to address discrimination, which costs us a major deal, which costs shareholders millions. They're going to crucify you. Let them. I'd rather lose a deal than lose what we stand for. But even as I said it, I felt the weight of the decision. $215 million. Gone. And with it, Apex's entry into the European aviation AI market. Stratos would use Novatech's patents to develop next-generation navigation systems. We'd be playing catch-up for years. The elevator opened and Isabel emerged, carrying another tablet. We have a problem, a big one. Bigger than losing the Novatech deal? Different kind of problem. I've been digging into Tristan Vaughn's background, the man who was sitting next to you on Flight 847. Turns out he's been investigated by the SEC 3 times for securities fraud. No charges filed, but the pattern is clear. He inflates acquisition targets, collects kickbacks from sellers, and moves on before anyone notices the company he bought was worthless. I thought about Tristan's confidence on the plane, his casual assumption of superiority, his invocation of powerful names. You think he's doing the same thing with Novatech? I think it's possible. The valuation Stratus is paying seems high, really high. I did some digging into Novatech's patents, the ones they're claiming as revolutionary. Most of them are based on LiDAR technology that became obsolete 3 years ago. So Werner is selling Stratos a lemon, and Tristan is getting a cut of the inflated purchase price. It's the same scheme he ran with Aerotech in 2019 and Skylink in 2020. Both companies turned out to be massively overvalued. Stratus took huge write-downs. A thought crystallized. Isabel, how much access do we have to Stratus's public filings? Everything that's required by the SEC. Why? Because if Tristan's running the same scheme again, there should be a pattern. Shell companies, wire transfers, real estate purchases in tax havens. She smiled slowly. You want to investigate him. I want to expose him. If he defrauded Stratos, the SEC needs to know. And if that happens to tank the Novatech deal before it closes, we get another shot at the acquisition. Priya was shaking her head. Dominic, you can't use your resources to sabotage a competitor's deal just because they outbid you. That's anti-competitive behavior. The FTC would bury us. I'm not sabotaging anything. I'm reporting suspected securities fraud to the appropriate authorities. That's called being a responsible corporate citizen. Leon grinned. I love it when you get vengeful. It's like watching your father. My father wasn't vengeful. He was thorough. Isabel was already typing on her tablet. I'll pull Stratus's acquisition history and cross-reference with property records in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and Monaco. If Tristan's been getting kickbacks, they'll show up as real estate purchases or shell company formations. How long? Give me 6 hours, maybe less if I can rope in our forensic accounting team. Do it, but quietly. If word gets out that we're investigating Tristan, he'll cover his tracks. The elevator doors opened again. This time it was a young woman I didn't recognize, wearing a visitor badge. Dr. Kellen, I'm Yuki Tanaka from the New York Times. I know you're not doing interviews, but I'd like to talk to you about what happened on Flight 847. I'm writing a piece about discrimination in air travel, and I think your story could... Priya stepped between us. Ms. Tanaka, Dr. Kellen is not available for interviews at this time. Please contact our media relations department to schedule. I'll talk to her. Priya's head whipped toward me. No, you won't. We haven't prepared. You haven't been media trained. You're exhausted and angry, and you're going to say something that ends up as a headline we can't walk back. Good. I want a headline we can't walk back. Because if we can walk it back, it means we didn't mean it. I turned to Yuki Tanaka. Ms. Tanaka, I'll give you 30 minutes, but I want something in return. I want you to interview the victims, Dr. Osi, Commander Hayes, Zara Bishara. I want their faces and their stories in print next to mine. This isn't about me. It's about the 40 people who came before me and the thousands who'll come after if we don't fix this. Yuki pulled out a digital recorder. That's exactly the story I want to write. Can we start now? We found an empty conference room. Yuki set up her recorder and pulled out a notebook. Priya stood in the corner, arms crossed, radiating disapproval. Dr. Kellen, let's start with this morning. Walk me through what happened from the moment you arrived at the airport. I told her everything. The check-in agent who questioned my ticket, the TSA officer who searched my bag while waving white passengers through, the lounge receptionist who made me wait for verification, the flight attendant who offered me soft drinks instead of scotch, the captain who threatened restraints without asking for my side. Yuki took notes, occasionally asking for clarification. Her questions were sharp but fair. When you realized you were being discriminated against, why didn't you identify yourself immediately? Why let it escalate? Because identifying myself would have solved my problem, but not the problem. The next person in a hoodie, the next passenger who doesn't look like they belong in first class, they won't have a CEO card to flash. They need the system to work for them, not just for me. But by letting it escalate, you put yourself in danger. What if the crew had actually restrained you? Then 12 million people would have seen a black CEO dragged bleeding from his own aircraft. And maybe that's the image we need to finally admit this still happens. That we haven't moved past this. That a hoodie and brown skin can still get you treated like a threat. Yuki looked up from her notes. Some critics are already saying you staged this, that you deliberately provoked the crew to create a viral moment for publicity. Tell me this. What CEO would stage a PR disaster that cost him a $215 million acquisition, triggered a boycott that's already cost us an estimated $40 million in lost bookings, and exposed his company to hundreds of millions in discrimination lawsuits? If this was staged, I'm the worst businessman in history. She smiled slightly. Fair point. But the timing is convenient. You take over as CEO 10 months ago. You're trying to establish yourself separate from your father's legacy. A viral moment showing you standing up to discrimination is good branding. Ms. Tanaka, this morning I had blood glued to my temple by an EMT because my head hit an overhead bin. I had a crew I'm responsible for threaten me with restraints. I had to call in a favor from the FAA chairman to avoid being zip-tied to a jump seat. If that's branding, I'm doing it wrong. She nodded, making a note. The all-hands meeting. You announced a $25 million victim compensation fund, body cameras, third-party oversight, and your own temporary removal as CEO. That's a significant commitment. Can Apex afford it? We have to afford it. The question isn't can we afford to do this, it's can we afford not to. Your stock is going to take a hit tomorrow. Probably, but stock prices recover, trust doesn't. If passengers don't trust us to treat them with basic dignity, we don't deserve to be in business. Yuki leaned back in her chair. Off the record, Dr. Kellen, how do you feel right now? Not as a CEO, as a person who got humiliated by his own employees. I considered lying, saying something corporate about resilience and forward focus, but she'd asked for the truth. Angry, exhausted, betrayed, and guilty, because I've been CEO for 10 months and this happened on my watch. 40 people filed complaints and my company dismissed them. That's on me. Your father was CEO when most of those complaints were filed. Then it's on both of us. He built something beautiful and I inherited it, but we both failed to protect the people it was supposed to serve. Yuki turned off the recorder. Thank you for your honesty. I'll have the story ready for tomorrow's paper, and I'll reach out to the victims you mentioned. After she left, Priya finally spoke. That was either brilliant or catastrophic. I won't know which until I see the headline. It doesn't matter, it's the truth. My phone buzzed. Isabel. Found something, you need to see this, now. I met her in the war room, a secure conference room on the 47th floor where we handled sensitive matters. The walls were lined with screens showing spreadsheets and property records and corporate filings. Isabel pointed to one screen. Tristan Vaughn, SVP of Acquisitions at Stratus for 6 years. In that time, he's closed 12 major deals. 7 of them were later written down as overvalued. Stratus lost an estimated $800 million across those 7 deals. And they kept him employed? He brings in deals, boards like deals, but look at this. She pulled up a property record from Grand Cayman. 3 months after the Skylink acquisition in 2020, a shell company called Nexus Holdings bought a $4.5 million villa. The company is registered to a law firm in Panama, but I traced the IP address used to set it up. It came from a residential address in Greenwich, Connecticut, 42 Maplewood Drive. Tristan's home address. Exactly. And here's the kicker. 3 months after Stratos closed the Skylink deal, the CEO of Skylink bought a villa in Lake Como for €3 million. Both purchases happened within weeks of each other. Both villas are vacation properties, not primary residences. Both purchases were cash. The pattern was clear. Tristan inflated the purchase price. The seller got rich. Tristan got a kickback funneled through shell companies. Stratos got a worthless asset. Does the Novatech deal fit the pattern? Isabel pulled up another screen. Werner Albrecht, CEO of Novatech, just put down a deposit on an 8 million franc chalet in Zermatt. The seller? A shell company registered in Liechtenstein. 3 guesses who owns it. Nexus Holdings. Bingo. Tristan's not even being creative anymore. He's using the same shell company. I stared at the evidence. It was circumstantial but compelling. Enough to trigger an SEC investigation. Enough to sink the Stratus Novatech deal before it closed. Send this to the SEC. Anonymous tip. Don't mention Apex. Just lay out the pattern and let them investigate. Already drafted. I'll send it in 10 minutes from a burner email account. Good. And Isabel, thank you for finding this, for caring enough to look. She met my eyes. Dr. Kellen, my parents came here from the Philippines in 1987. My father was an engineer who got passed over for promotion 17 times because his accent was hard to understand. He died believing he'd failed, that he wasn't good enough. What happened to you today? That was my father's life, every day. So yeah, I care enough to look. After she left, I stood alone in the war room, surrounded by screens full of evidence that would destroy Tristan Vaughn's career and possibly save mine. But it felt hollow. Because even if the SEC investigation worked, even if Stratus pulled out of the deal and I got another shot at Novatech, it didn't change what had happened on Flight 847. It didn't undo the humiliation. It didn't restore the dignity that had been stripped away by people who were supposed to serve and protect. My father's voice returned, quieter now. Konoi, power isn't measured by how high you sit. It's measured by how many people you lift up when you rise. I looked at the screens, at the evidence that could bury Tristan, at the proof that vindication was possible. And I thought about Zara Bishara, 16 years old, losing a scholarship because someone assumed she was a thief. The choice was clear. I walked out of the war room and found Priya in her office. The SEC tip goes out in 5 minutes. When it hits, Stratos is going to panic. They'll pull the Novatech deal within 48 hours. We'll get a second chance at the acquisition. Priya looked up from her laptop. That's good news. So why do you look like someone died? Because winning like this feels like losing. Tristan deserves to go down for fraud, but using that to get a business advantage feels dirty. Dominic, he stole the deal from you while you were dealing with a crisis he helped create. He sat next to you and watched you get humiliated. He doesn't deserve your guilt. I know, but my father didn't build this company by playing dirty. He built it by being better, by working harder, by proving that integrity could compete with corruption. Your father also went bankrupt twice. Maybe a little strategic ruthlessness would have saved him some heartache. I sat down across from her. Send the SEC tip, but when we get a second shot at Novatech, I want to win it clean, better terms, better integration plan, better long-term value. Not because Tristan's in jail, but because we're the better partner. Priya smiled. Your father really did raise you right, against all odds. At 8 p.m., I finally left the office. The media had thinned to 3 vans. I walked out the front entrance instead of using the garage, letting them get their footage of the embattled CEO going home. A reporter shouted, "Dr. Kellen, do you regret flying coach?" I stopped. I wasn't flying coach. I was flying first class, and I don't regret it. I regret that it took 41 people getting discriminated against before I saw what was happening in my own company. I got into the waiting car. Maurice had insisted on picking me up, and let the exhaustion crash over me like a wave. Maurice pulled away from the curb, his eyes finding mine in the rearview mirror. Tough day, Dr. Kellen? That's one way to put it. For what it's worth, sir, my daughter showed me the video. What they did to you. And I want you to know, my grandson's 15. Black kid, smart as hell, wants to be an engineer. He's scared all the time. Scared of cops. Scared of teachers who don't believe in him. Scared of TSA and security guards and anyone with authority. When he saw you stand up at the end of that video, saw you tell them who you were. He cried. Said it was the first time he'd seen someone who looked like him have power instead of being afraid of it. My throat tightened. What's your grandson's name? Keon. Next time he's in Seattle, bring him to the office. I'll show him around. Maybe he can shadow our engineering team. Maurice's eyes were bright in the mirror. He'd like that, sir. He'd like that very much. We drove through the city in silence. I watched Seattle pass by the window, thinking about Keon and Zara and all the kids who needed to see someone like them wielding power for good instead of being crushed by it. My phone buzzed one last time. A text from Edmund Thorne. SEC just received an anonymous tip about Tristan Vaughn. They're opening an investigation. Should be interesting. I put the phone away and closed my eyes. Tomorrow would bring lawsuits and boycotts and board meetings and damage control. Tomorrow would bring headlines and hot takes and 1,000 opinions about whether I'd overreacted or underdelivered. But tonight, for just this moment, I'd done what my father taught me. When they try to erase you, make sure the world sees it happen. And when you have the power to make it right, use every ounce of it. The car turned onto my street. Home was close. 10.